Time for some bold predictions, starting with the offensive side of the football.
You are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. Special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day, and thanks for making us your first listen of the day. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications wherever you're getting your podcast. And stay in touch with the show by following me on Twitter at RichieBrads36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. It's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And today and tomorrow, we are going to be making some way too early bold predictions. Today, we'll be focused on the offensive side of the football. Tomorrow, we'll be looking at the defensive side of the football. But let's face it, we all love making bold predictions. We love making them crazy predictions. And that's what we're aiming for on this podcast. I did try to go at least sort of realistic. I'm not trying to say Cameron Skattebo is going to win the Heisman Trophy or Jordyn Tyson is going to break the single season receiving yards record or anything like that. But these are predictions that I do think could have some merit to them, while also being the kind of predictions that kind of get you excited and you're like, oh man, could you imagine? Sort of in that realm. I would also preface it with, I don't think all 5 of these are going to happen in the same year, but I do think that they'll kind of play off each other. With that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into the biggest portion here, and that's that I think the Sun Devils are going to end up yielding a top 5 rushing attack in the Big 12 this upcoming season. Look, we'll start with the obvious, and that's that ASU has just the most dynamic backfield that they've had in a while. You look at what's coming back, and the biggest part is very obviously Cameron Skattebo. And Skattebo last year had an outstanding season, especially when you consider the circumstances. Ran for 783 yards, 4.8 yards per carry. Also returning with him is DeCarlos Brooks, second on the team in rushing yards with 259. And that was playing just 4 games. You had Kyson Brown, who ran for 106 yards. He's third on the team. He's returning as well. You have added Raleek Brown, one of the most talented running backs that ASU has seen in a handful of years. You are adding Jason Brown, a 4-star freshman. There is a lot to like in this backfield right now. There's so many different weapons that ASU has at their disposal that can do so many different things. And it makes me feel that ASU is going to have a chance to yield like a very special rushing attack. And it's not going to be easy. The Big 12 last year ended up having 6 teams that averaged 200-plus rushing yards per game. Some of those teams include West Virginia, Cincinnati, Kansas State. Those are probably the toughest teams you're going to run into. 5 teams ran for 200-plus yards. The other team was UCF. It's going to be really tough to usurp those teams, especially when you consider the drop-off after Kansas State at 5th was Texas with almost 20 less rushing yards. ASU last year also wasn't an elite rushing attack, but a lot of that was because ASU wasn't in a situation where they could run the football effectively and efficiently. ASU was consistently behind in games this year and forced them to throw the football, and they weren't great at throwing the football either. So ASU's got a lot of work to do. But there's a few things that kind of come into play for me. The first one is, like we already talked about, ASU has so many different guys that they can use in this offense. Skattebo should be elite. Raleek Brown also has a chance to be elite. Kyson Brown, Jason Brown, those guys could find their own ways to contribute as younger guys. DeCarlos Brooks could be a touchdown dude. You also have to factor in that ASU could potentially get crafty with the offense, and you could see one of the wide receivers get a handful of carries. I know they did that with Elijah Badger last year. Badger ended up toting the ball 11 times. You could see another not offensive weapon, another wide receiver get those kind of opportunities. Jalen Conyers, the tight end, had 22 carries. There are touches here for guys who are not just running backs. You have to imagine Sam Leavitt might be running the ball a little bit. They brought in Jeff Sims to be a veteran quarterback. He's a really good running quarterback. There are more than a handful of pieces here for you to kind of sit there and go, yeah, maybe ASU could be a really good rushing attack. One of the other big things that I'm factoring in here, and this would also kind of be a bold prediction in itself, so I'll lump it together, is I think the offensive line is going to be really good. I look at the offensive line compared to where you were last year. First of all, I think the depth is much more apparent. Last year, there was a lot of coach talk and saying, we're too deep on the offensive line and we really like what we have. I never got there. This year, we're hearing the same thing. I think there's more confidence from the coaching staff with that, and I'm buying into it. ASU's got a ton of really good talent on the interior. They're returning back a really good center in Lee Fontanu. Their tackles are going to be bolstered from what they had last year, and as long as health is on their side, something that really hampered them last year, you should have a much improved unit. With a good offensive line comes a good run game. And ASU is no stranger to good run games. I mean, they've had plenty of dynamic runners come through this program in the last several years. Eno Benjamin had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons with Arizona State. Jaden Daniels at quarterback ran for 700 yards his final year at Arizona State. Rashad White ran for 1,000 yards a few years ago. Xavier Valade ran for 1,000 yards a few years ago. ASU is more than capable of putting together offenses that can yield really good rushing attacks. I think this is the year they begin to get back on track with that kind of production, with that kind of upside, that kind of talent. Skattebo is going to be one of the biggest key factors here for Arizona State being able to find a way to be consistent in the run game. I have a feeling that everything is going to start through him and going to, no pun intended, run through Cameron Skattebo. I think where Skattebo goes, ASU will follow offensively. To the point where I think Skattebo could be looking at some big-time honors in the 2024 season. But we're going to hop into that in just a moment as we continue my bold predictions. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Wherever you're getting your podcasts, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen. Shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Back into our conversation, back to our bold predictions. Next up, we're finishing up where we left off just a moment ago with Cameron Skattebo. Last year, Skattebo finished in the top 3 for the Paul Hornung Award, which is the nation's most versatile player. For my money's worth and a lot of people's money's worth, even outside of Arizona, Skattebo should have won it. He did it as a runner, as a receiver, as a passer, as a punter. He did everything for Arizona State. He should have won it last year because of the amount of facets that he contributed. Now, losing to Travis Hunter is nothing to be ashamed of. He is one of the best players in college football. I just think that from a very literal standpoint, Skattebo did more for your team. But neither here nor there. I think that this is the year that Skattebo gets that recognition, because I am going to say that Skattebo finishes as an all-conference player. Now, is that first team? Is that second team? Is it honorable mention? I'm not sure. And I also think that he's not just honorable mention. I think he's first or second team, depending on how many running backs they decide to include. If they include 2 running backs on each team, then yeah, Skattebo should be a lock, in my opinion. The reason why is, again, kind of where we left off with the first bold prediction, is I think that this offense is going to run through Cameron Skattebo. There's a lot of reason to believe that. The first and most obvious is he's the best player on offense returning from last year. Elijah Badger's gone. Jalen Conyers is gone. There is a big hole to fill on this offense for a secret weapon or a known weapon for ASU. Skattebo will come in as one of the sleepers in the Big 12. I know that he finished top 3 for the Paul Hornung Award, but I also am pretty sure not a lot of people are aware of who Cameron Skattebo is, if for no other reason than he played in the Pac-12, and the Pac-12, as we all know, isn't exactly known for getting recognition from a national level. He's going to come in, he's going to be a sneaky good player that ASU is aware of, and they're going to turn him into a weapon. I think you're looking at Skattebo being able to top 1,000 rushing yards, and that's obviously where it's going to start. He's not going to be an all-conference player unless he gets to that point. But he could have got there last year. He just only got 164 carries. He's going to be able to hit that 200 mark. And when he's averaging 4.8 yards per carry, that's going to throw him well over the 1,000-yard mark, and he's going to be, or by my math isn't great today, 4.8 yards per carry, as long as it's not 200 on the dot, like if it's at 250 mark, he'll be well over 1,000. There's great opportunity here for him to seize those amount of carries. And again, this is a deep backfield. We already mentioned all the other guys he'll be competing with, but Skattebo sets himself apart in several different ways. He's a power runner. He's somebody who is like the game speed on Cameron Skattebo. I don't know what his 40 time is, but once he gets a full head of steam, there's not a lot of guys who are going to be able to track him down. He's just got that determination, that grit, and that ability to be the long strider. That makes him good for big plays. We saw it last year when he had a 66-yard touchdown reception and a 66-yard touchdown rush. He's able to do that with a guy that's that big of a weapon as a runner, as a receiver. Hard to keep him off that list. And again, if he is able to get those plays as a passer again, he threw 15 passes last year. He doesn't need to do that again, but if he does, you have to recognize that. You need to give him his flowers. There's a great opportunity for Skattebo with the amount of ways that he touches the football to end up being someone that we look back on at the end of the season when we make our all Big 12 teams. We go, yeah, probably pretty fair to give him that nod and that distinction. Next up, we are going to be staying in the running back room and the backfield. Raleek Brown, I'm saying double-digit touchdowns. Crazy prediction. But hear me out. Like with Skattebo, Raleek Brown touches the ball in more ways than one. He's a runner, he's a receiver, and there's return man opportunities here. With Elijah Badger gone, there is a massive hole in the return game that Raleek Brown could easily step into. And for what it's worth, I think Jordyn Tyson is also going to have first dibs on some of the returning opportunities. But Raleek Brown is so explosive. The way that you just get him the football and he will instantly make a big play for you almost every time, that's huge. And I think that he hasn't been able to see the field a lot during his first 2 years at USC because of the vast amount of talent that was ahead of him. It wasn't anything to do with Raleek Brown, the player. It was the fact that the wide receiver room had a ton of NFL guys, and the running back room had plenty of other NFL guys. It's difficult to get onto the football field. He's coming to Arizona State, and things still aren't going to be easy. This is a really good running back room. But in the same token, he's just a weapon. ASU is going to find it very difficult to keep him off the football field. One of the things that really stands out to me about Raleek Brown's ability is as a receiver. Now, in his tenure with USC, they actually flexed him out to receiver and had him running routes and everything. He looked good. Coming to Arizona State, they've already confirmed, hey, this is a running back. We plan to use Raleek Brown as a running back, not a wide receiver. That doesn't mean he's not going to get receiving work. When he gets the touches as a runner and as a receiver, he could very easily be in that 150 touches realm where he could get 100 carries, 50 catches, somewhere in that ballpark. It is very, very realistic. He could turn almost any opportunity that he touches the football to make a big play. And with an ASU team that I think is going to be much improved on offense, significantly improved on offense, I think that Raleek Brown has a really good opportunity to end up churning out double-digit touchdowns. He could do it as a runner. He could do it as a receiver. And like I said, there's the ability to do it as a return man as well on special teams. He is fast. He is explosive. His change of direction is ridiculous. Put the ball in his hands, he's going to make something happen. This is a kid that has so much God-given talent. And if everything clicks, he's going to be 10-plus touchdowns. One more bold prediction before we get into my final bold prediction. I'm saying Jordyn Tyson hits 1,000 yards. Jordyn Tyson, somebody that I am ridiculously excited about. Someone who is able to beat you as a receiver and as a return man, but focusing as a receiver here is a big dude at 6'1", 6'2", depending on how his college size ends up coming out. Realistically, he is very fast. I don't have a timer to see. I would guess he's in that 4.4 range, probably even a little quicker. He showed in spring practice that he can be a go up and get it guy and a receiver who is able to just make the big plays down the field, whether it's beating you off the press or finding a way to be a dynamic route runner or someone who just goes up and gets it, that 50-50 ball guy. Jordyn Tyson has shown the ability to do that. And if he is able to put that together, he should be able to get to the 1,000-yard mark. And if for no other reason than ASU is just really good at getting 1,000-yard receivers. Over the last several years, you've had N'Keal Harry, Brandon Ayuk, Elijah Badger have been 1,000-yard receivers for you. All three of them are NFL talent players. So is Jordyn Tyson. He's built like an NFL player. He looks like an NFL player. So he fits that. He checks that off the checklist. Now what else does he have? He's got the overall explosiveness. Some that I truly think he could be the most explosive receiver since Brandon Ayuk. The speed itself is the first thing that I notice. And if Tyson's able to really clean up his game as a route runner, which for all intents and purposes appears to be the case, you're going to have a very difficult time trying to slow him down, literally and figuratively. This is also a team that has really favored having that number one receiver. Last year, Elijah Badger had 713 yards. The next closest receiver was Xavier Guillory with 226. Even before the first year of Keny Dillingham, they had one guy who was the 1,000-yard guy, and the next closest was a few hundred yards off. Tyson could be the number one receiver. That's going to give him the opportunity to get the lion's share of touches. And I think that ends up turning into a 1,000-yard season. Now, 10 touchdowns, who knows? 100 catches, who knows? For all we know, he could be 60 catches and 6 touchdowns, but I think he gets 1,000 yards. That's one of the ones that I wouldn't say feels the most realistic, but of my top 5, I would put that as my number 2 for bold predictions. I think are the closest to happening, with probably a top 5 running game being number 1. But I do have one more bold prediction, one that I'm actually pretty excited about, especially if it does end up coming to fruition. We're going to take a look at it in just a moment. This is the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. One more time, wherever you get your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Final bold prediction, ladies and gentlemen. I am saying that Sam Leavitt, redshirt freshman quarterback, first year at the program, former 4-star recruit, beat out Jaden Rashada as QB1 during spring ball. That Sam Leavitt is going to have the best statistical season since 2019 in Jaden Daniels, not rookie year, freshman year. Daniels threw just under 3,000 yards at 2,943. He threw 17 touchdowns against 2 interceptions. He also ran for 355 yards and 3 more scores. I'm saying Sam Leavitt's in that ballpark. I don't know if he's going to be better in those categories, but I do think it's going to be the best season since 2019. And, admittedly, that's not a high bar, because Jaden Daniels, 2020, pretty solid. 5 touchdowns, 1 interception, but he only played 4 games. 2021, Jaden Daniels was a train wreck. 2022, you appreciate what Trenton Bourguet did. He didn't start the full season. Emory Jones, who played the other half, did not look good. And last year, ASU had 4 different quarterbacks. It's not the highest bar in the world, but you're still setting that expectation that Leavitt can have the best season since 2019. There are plenty of guys to get the ball to in the passing game. We mentioned 2 running backs alone with Cameron Skattebo and Raleek Brown that I believe to be huge assets as receiving backs. I also mentioned that Jordyn Tyson will be a 1,000-yard receiver. In a best-case scenario, those 3 should be able to combine for 1,500 yards or a little bit more. That in itself is already a massive win for the team. Then you factor in the other weapons they have. Jake Smith, Troy O'Mary, Melcon Stovall. They've got their tight ends. There's more running backs. It's a better offensive line. It's going to be better play calling with Marcus Arroyo getting really comfortable and getting the scheme implemented. Keny Dillingham's the offensive guru. There's a lot that's going right for the program right now. And it has me thinking that we're going to end up seeing a really good season out of Sam Leavitt. And it's not like this is a no-name guy. This is a former 4-star recruit, somebody who was as highly recruited as Jaden Rashada was coming out of high school in the 2023 cycle. He's got the talent. It's there. It's just a matter of getting to that point. It's just a matter of seeing him arrive as that kind of passer. And it's a high expectation. Like, sure, statistically, it's not the most impressive year. But you're also asking this out of a first-year, full-time starting quarterback with a new program. That in itself is pretty big. Having any significant expectations may or may not be fair. And yet, I don't have a problem giving them to Sam Leavitt. I'm not saying Heisman campaign. I'm not even saying that he matches the totals. He doesn't need to throw 2,900 yards. He doesn't need to throw 17 interceptions and score 20 total touchdowns. I just need him to be in that realm of possibilities. If Sam Leavitt threw for 2,500 yards, 15 touchdowns against 5 interceptions, handful of rushing yards, and maybe a few more rushing touchdowns, I'm good with that. Especially if ASU does have a top 5 running game. Especially if ASU does have several players who get into the end zone a lot. With Raleek Brown, with Cameron Skattebo, with Jordyn Tyson, or anyone else. There's more than enough guys here to help out Sam Leavitt get to the next level as a passer and as someone who's going to orchestrate the offense. I believe in Sam Leavitt. He showed off a lot of potential during spring ball. Take it with a grain of salt because it's spring ball. But nonetheless, you look at the talent that's there, not just for him, but the guys he's going to be throwing to. You take a look at the running game, which should make his life a little bit easier. You take a look at the offensive line, which should be able to keep him upright. And you look at the play calling from Marcus Arroyo and from Keny Dillingham. This feels like a really good culmination of opportunities here that should be able to make life a lot easier for Sam Leavitt to have a good statistical season and hopefully just a great season period for ASU. You're not looking for him to end up being one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 in his first year. You just want him to be an upgrade over what you've had for the last 3 to 4 years. It's not asking him to be elite. We wouldn't turn down elite. But I think since 2019, this is going to end up being one of the best seasons that the Sun Devils have had at the quarterback position. I'm really hoping so, at least. But there's tons of other predictions that I could have gotten into. Tons of other guys that should be able to have good statistical seasons. An offensive line that will hopefully be 10 times improved from what we saw last year. Maybe the offense as a whole ends up being one of the best units in the Big 12. I want to know what your guys' bold predictions are for the offense. Drop them in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter at Richie Bradshaw36, the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like, subscribe, turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. I appreciate you guys for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. And a shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. We're going to be back again tomorrow as we take a look at the defensive side of the football. We make some bold predictions there, including some sack masters, some turnovers, and some overall efforts from the defense. We'll talk about it tomorrow, and I'll see you then. Until next time, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.